Boomer shooters are a response to the nostalgic wave created from the remakes of old school 90s shooters like Rise of the Triad and Shadow Warrior. But the term itself never really came to fruition until Doom 2016 and Eternal came swinging. They both offered the best of both worlds, amazing graphics and gameplay. But a huge number of indie developers decided to rewind the clock once again, but in a modern fashion. Case in point, Boomer shooters. You take polished controls, gameplay and mechanics and put it into a blender with old school graphics. Something that you would see in a GZ Doom engine or the 3D Realm style games like Duke Nukem 3D. This isn't the first time that games following a specific trend were being placed under an umbrella term. For instance, the shooters that cropped out of the woodwork after the release of Doom would be called Doom clones. They simply followed the same template as that game did. From map design to gun handling, secrets, finding key items, etc. The games themselves were becoming too similar. Almost. It wasn't until '96 that Quake would release, shaking up the industry once again but on a 3D plane. So now we were having clones of one another, following the same beat. Eventually it would wear out. Once the key games like Half-Life, GoldenEye 07 and Halo would bring a new template to follow, the other shooters that came before would eventually be left in the dust. This was inevitable, however, since the FPS industry was growing and needed room to expand and try different ideas. We would still get a few old school games here and there, but in the early 2000s, it eventually faded into obscurity. In the early 2010s finally, we would see old franchises be resurrected, like Serious Sam, Duke Nukem, Rise of the Triad and Shadow Warrior. But it wasn't enough, and while a few of them brought back the old school feeling of fast-paced shooters once again, it didn't create a return to form trend that the new Doom games did. Doom 2016 and Eternal were the shake-up we needed to create the harmony that we have now in the shooter genre, where we have both camps coexisting with one another, one for slower paced experiences and the other for the old school Quake style gameplay that had been needing a comeback. After 2016, the seed for the boomer shooter trend would grow, with one game in 2018 spearheading the genre for a period of time, Dusk. Dusk is an old school Quake inspired shooter with a great level of customization, a great sense of movement, even to the point of being able to front and backflip during vertical jumps. It is my personal favorite out of all the recent boomer shooters we have got to enjoy over the years. David Szymanski is an insanely talented developer, making something that is more like a sequel to the first Quake than Quake 2 ever was. And that's not the only one either. You also have other amazing titles like Medieval, which is a spiritual successor to Heretic, which is kind of like Doom but with magic, wizards and sorcery. Ultra Kill, the most advanced boomer shooter you will find, and it just recently released with Act 2. Proteus, while still being in early access, has a lot of polish that has a beautiful blend of modern and pixel graphics blended together. Then finally, you have Iron Fury, made by 3D Realms, who had decided to go back to basics, taking what Duke Nukem 3D did, while adding a female protagonist in a whole different universe into the mix. There are a ton of these boomer shooters coming out, and as long as there is demand, the interest for more of them will always generate more creations down the track. But at the same time, it will eventually reach a plateau period, where the games become uninspired or more or less the same as what came before. Saturation is a huge problem that affects every genre, and it can't be avoided. But it's great to know that the legacy of both the classic Doom games and the original Quake are being showered with games that basically pay homage to them both. I don't know personally if boomer shooters have reached their peak. Maybe it's time for something new. In the end, boomer shooters are a callback to the 90s era of shooters, a time when fast-paced gameplay and frantic combat were the name of the game. At this stage, I do hope to see games where they have the gameplay variety of Ultra Kill and the graphical polish of Doom Eternal, which in my opinion would be the next step since we have free and powerful engines that indie developers could use to get the job done. But time will tell. I will provide a link down below to a Steam curator who can help you get on the right track for both old school FPS games and boomer shooters. But if you want the very best of boomer shooters, then I would suggest Ultra Kill and Dusk, since nothing else comes remotely close to those two. Thank you for watching.